Welcome to the Remarkable Life podcast. I'm your host and coach, and today interviewer, Caryn Gillen. And we have a guest in the house on the mic. We have Liz Dennery from SheBrand here to set us straight, to inspire us, and to clarify things. So, Liz, will you introduce yourself for everybody, please?
Thank you, Caryn. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I am a brand strategist for women and companies that care about women. I am a 25 plus year PR pro. I'm dating myself a little bit.
Good.
And at SheBrand, we help put women and companies that care about them in the spotlight.
So, I've known you for, I don't know, 8 years. If Liv's eight, I've known you for at least 8 years because I met you when I was
Yeah, I
pregnant.
remember when you were bouncing on the ball. Yep,
Yeah.
while you were
So,
pregnant with Liv.
so really almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And it's always been about women for you. Why is that? Where does that come from?
That's such a good question. I mean, even way back when I had my first PR agency and we worked specifically with fashion brands and beauty brands, I was always in my philanthropic work, working with charities that support women. And I think for me, growing up, I didn't have great role models showing me how to use my voice and to, if you will, claim my own power and to really empower myself. And so I think I was pulled as I grew as a business owner and became more successful. I really, really wanted to give back in that way. And I found that it was selfish. My personal fulfillment came from helping at-risk teen girls, younger professional women, and supporting them. And that is really how SheBrand started back in 2010.
I love it. I love it because you said it was selfish. Because I think if we're doing it right, it should feel like it's selfish. It should feel like we're getting away with something because I think like you have this longevity with it. We get longevity from people who are doing things that serve them in some way while they serve other people. So I just think that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's the things that we care about most and just happen to be in service, right, to other
Hmm.
people. But it's really, there's a great book. I was actually talking about it yesterday that I bought for my son for us to read together many years ago, How to Fill Your Bucket. And it really is
Hmm.
about how we learn that by filling other people's bucket, it actually fills our own.
Yeah, that's right. All right. And if you want to follow Liz, we'll put this stuff in the show notes, but her Instagram is always inspiring for me from the angle of feminism and also branding. But, you're always on top of issues that pertain to women. And I always just appreciate
Yeah.
getting to hear your voice. So thank you for being loud.
At this point, at this stage in my life, I don't know any other way to be, truthfully.
Good. Okay. So before we get into any other conversation about anything related to branding, can you tell us
Mhm.
first what is a brand?
Such a good question, right? Because most people, many people, when they think of a brand, they think of a logo and a
Yeah.
slogan and colors, color palette, fonts, etc. And the reality is, a brand is something that exists in someone else's mind. It is the words and the images, the thoughts, the feelings that come to mind when someone interacts with you in some way, when they go to your website, when they're using your product. That is the epitome of a brand. It is the value that someone gets from working with you, from using your product, partaking in your service. It is the promise of that value. So I like to say that it's the real estate that someone else, if you're talking about a person, or you could be talking about a product, but it's the real estate in your mind about that person or that product, right? It's all about perception. And
Hmm.
we have a tremendous amount of sway, if you will, in terms of how we affect that perception. And that is branding,
Okay.
right?
So there's what we do to show up to try to influence people's perception, but the thing that the brand is really what's perceived by others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the promise that is perceived by others, it is the value that is perceived. by someone else, right?
Mhm.
It is what they're thinking about. It's that very famous Jeff Bezos quote, right? He
Mhm.
said, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah. And this is one of my favorite questions is if anyone gets referred to me or to one of my clients, I'm like, well, what did someone say to have the other person go, oh, you need to talk to Caryn or you need to talk to Liz because we need to know that sentence.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
so smart, right? It's really, I mean, it's why we do surveys and it's why we ask questions, because we want to know how we are perceived, because we might need to course correct, because there are people that say, well, I don't have a brand, or I don't want to have a brand. But the reality is you do.
Mhm.
Everyone has a brand, because people are going to talk about you. They're going to think about you in some way. They're going to perceive you if they interact with you. I mean, that's just reality. And so we have the ability to affect that in some way. And that is the process of branding. It's not just a color. And yet it can be, because
Mhm.
Caryn, what is my color?
Purple. It's very much purple.
Right? And
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people who have said to me over the years, I know when I see that purple package in my mailbox, I know
Mhm.
exactly who it came from,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You mentioned feminism earlier. That is one of my content pillars, if you will. It's something that I really, really care about. Women's rights are crucial. And obviously, we see what's going on today in the world. So I talk about that a lot. So oftentimes, when people are introducing me, as you did, or we're talking, the topic of feminism comes up. That
Mhm.
is an example of good branding.
Right. So it also means that you're not getting some bro marketer referred to you, right? It's
Exactly.
like it's
Right.
setting up this
Right.
invisible set of filters so that you're not having to
Mhm.
have 20 consultations with people who are completely wrong for you.
100%. One of the most important things is knowing who you are for and who you are not.
Mhm.
I can't tell you, and I know you see this too with your clients, but they think that they need to appeal to everyone and speak to everyone. And that really just dilutes your brand exponentially. It's okay to have a
Mhm.
few haters. It's okay to repel certain people, because there are what, 7.8 billion people in the world, and you are not going to be for all of them. You want to find your people. You want to have that light on that brings them in, that appeals to them. And you're going to do that by getting really clear about who you are and what you stand for, and communicating that and engaging with people in that way.
Yeah. So for me, that brings up the ideas of how potent we can be and how
Mm-hmm.
impactful we can be. And I mean, have you noticed working with all these women, like, is it harder? Do we have extra layers to get through of being really potent because we're enculturated to be not that way?
Well, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, the conditioning that women have historically is about accommodating, pleasing others, often playing small. Don't be too loud. Look
Mhm.
good, but not too good. And so there's a lot of self sabotage going on. There's a lot of concern and fear for speaking up. And truthfully, in the world that we live in today, in the digital space, where anybody behind a keyboard has a voice, it can be scary, right? And
Mhm.
cancel culture is real. So, regardless of gender. And so, I think that while it is really important to be authentic and be willing to be vulnerable, and I find those tools, if you will, to be really powerful in terms of attracting your right people, I understand the fear that a lot of women have of being harassed online, being stalked online, people throwing things at them, because it does happen. However, if you want to create a really compelling brand, and if you want to resonate with your right people, you are going to have the courage to speak your truth.
Mhm. Right. This makes me think about values work too, like branding and values. They're pretty
Mm.
interlinked. Yeah.
They are.
Because, yeah, because
Yeah,
if you're going to show up from courage, I think you have to do it from your values or you're going to burn out really quickly.
of course. Of
Yeah.
course. And I feel that Simon Sinek talks about it really, really powerful, right? In terms of starting with why, like understanding, why am I doing the work that I'm doing? Why do I care so much about it? I mean, you asked me in the beginning of our conversation, right? I've been working with women forever, and that is such a big passion of mine because it is related to my own values of connection and women's power in the world. And so, yes, understanding our values is key.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we all want to be authentic and we want to have brands. And I know personally, like sometimes I see accounts or whatever, and I'm like, it's just a bunch of pretty pictures. So, like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between authentic marketing or branding? Like, how are they the same? How are they different?
So I think people get very caught up in things looking a certain way. And we've all seen those really messy reels, for example, or posts that go viral that are not pretty, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody just absolutely bawling on camera or sharing something from their heart. And so I think there's a time and a place for everything. I think the important thing is going back to, you know, what are my values and what do I care about most, is understanding how you want to convey the information. You know, how do you want to show up? And so for some people, looking a certain way and, you know, having an Instagram grid be beautiful is really important to them. And if that's working, for example, with a lot of fashion brands, that does really work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Because beauty is such a
But if
part of
you,
who they are.
aesthetic, right,
Yeah.
and visual is really important, and they are attracting, by the way, a certain type of customer. But if you are, you know, a trauma coach, for example, then that's probably not going to be your aesthetic. And sharing, you know, your voice on social, sharing certain quotes that really resonate with your audience, you know, you are probably going to be more focused on education versus a certain look. And so I think going back to what you were saying in terms of values and also really knowing who you are and what it is that you want to convey, then you can actually build a strategy that works for you. So it depends on, am I a fashion brand or a stylist? Am I a financial advisor? Right? What might I be sharing? If I am I a life coach, what might I be sharing? And also understanding who your audience is, right? Where they're hanging out and what content they're consuming. So it does require some research.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Get to know who you are and who they are.
Exactly. And that is a big part of the brand foundation work that we do. And, you know, I see so many people putting the cart before the horse, and they're out there marketing, if you will, engaging, and they haven't done the brand foundation. I like to say that the brand strategy, the brand foundation is the why, and the marketing is the how. And if
Mm-hmm.
you haven't done the why first, why am I here? Why am I doing this? You know, who am I?
Yeah.
What are my values? All of these pieces, then your marketing strategy is not going to be effective. It's not going to be resonant. It's going to be like throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's going to be a little bit, you might even be showing up every day, but you're kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, really important to do those foundational pieces first.
Yeah. This feels like when people don't know what to say or don't know if they're doing it quote unquote right. So it's like if your
Mhm.
foundation is missing, you're always going to kind of feel that all over the place feeling.
And I will add to that too, what we were talking about with women and the conditioning, the programming that we have. I also see a lot of perfectionism, and I see
Mm,
a lot of hiding out
yeah.
and self-sabotage and worry. And, you know, you're talking about maybe not knowing what to post. We really have to diagnose, is it fear, right? Do we really know what to say and we have things to say, but we're afraid? Or have we not created a content strategy, the brand foundation first, and then a content strategy, and identified certain pillars that we are really passionate about, that we help our clients with, and that we are going to touch on consistently, because it is work, Caryn. I think there's a fallacy out there that, because we see, there's so many smoke and mirrors. We see people and it seems to be effortless. I guarantee you it's not effortless. It
Right.
is work. And so I do also see with a lot of women, when it starts to get hard, they're saying this doesn't work and they give
Mm-hmm.
up too quickly, right? Or they are very affected by what's going on around them, and they think that they need to try this marketing strategy, or that's the one that works. It's sort
Mm-hmm.
of the flavor of the week, as opposed to going back to what's going to work specifically for them. I think the comparisonitis and really getting swayed by every bright, shiny object out there is hurting a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I mean, from personal experience, it does take the impact out when you don't have that foundation set,
Mm-hmm.
because you
Yeah.
end
And
up
I think
saying
it
less.
feels, yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. That's the irony of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people might wonder, and I wonder for myself, like, how do we use storytelling without sounding like we're just talking about ourselves all the time?
Mm, right.
Yeah.
So that's such a good question, because I think some of the most powerful storytelling actually centers the potential client
Hmm.
and or highlights current clients. It doesn't always have to be our stories, although our stories are compelling, because 9 times out of 10 there's going to be someone out there, there are going to be a lot of people out there who that resonates for, particularly when we're sharing a vulnerable story. It doesn't mean that we have to, you know, vomit personal stories out there daily, because I see that too. I see a lot of oversharing,
Hmm.
right? And so I think
Yeah.
that there is a happy balance. But I do think that centering the potential client versus ourselves can be really powerful, right? So as opposed to, I did this, I did that, here's what I want to tell you today, it can be asking questions of them and really putting them in the story so that they can see themselves in it.
Hmm.
And we accomplish that by highlighting people in our community, looking for inspiration, people who inspire in terms of what we do, and using them, their stories. So it doesn't always have to be about us.
Yeah. I really like what you've done lately with Taylor Swift and following from your perspective, kind of a behind the scenes brand explanation of like, here's why this is great. Here's what you can learn about this. It's been fun.
Yeah, and she's a great example, and that is a wonderful example of what I'm talking about, right? So bring, whether it is current events, whether it is something from the past historically, whether it is a case study or a client story, there are definitely lots of opportunities to bring others into the mix, so it's not always about you. I'm always looking for stories about brand, as I read media.
Hmm.
I'm looking at what other brands are doing so that I can share. I'm working on a story right now about, what luxury brands can actually teach entrepreneurs about building their brand. So,
Hmm.
bringing other pieces. And I always encourage clients to look outside of their industry, right?
Yeah.
So, because there's so much really interesting things out there. Um, I was reading something about the art world the other day, and there was a thread that I thought about that would be really interesting from a brand perspective. So I think I think critical thinking is key. I think if
Hmm.
if we can put on our critical thinking caps as we are creating content, I believe that we can create things that not just help our clients, but really help us, right? To
Yeah.
to parse out what is working.
I read one recently and it was a personal trainer who had moved into a neighborhood with lots of businesses in it. And every day they would just go get a coffee for them and a coffee for whoever was at the counter, wherever they were going to go. And it was just
Mhm.
meeting someone every day. And I was like, well, how do we bring that to the online business space? Because we can do that. We don't have
Mm,
physical businesses, but there
yes.
is a way to connect in a real way, give somebody something that lifts up their day and use that. I haven't done it yet, but it is on my mind.
Yeah. And that's a great example because at the end of the day, marketing is about connection. And I think there is this incredible pressure for us to be shouting from the rooftops on our social channels.
Hmm.
And that's not really effective for most people. You
Yeah.
know, obviously there are pieces that go viral, and we see that and we think that is the panacea. That is the epitome of what I want to create. But the reality is, and you and I have talked about this, so much can come from a one-on-one connection.
Hmm.
So much can come from even a small email list. I've had clients say, well, I only have 500 people, on my email list, and my goal this year is to get to 5,000 people. And I will say 500 people is an entire theater of
Yeah.
people
Right.
that have decided to give you their personal contact information so that you can have a relationship with them.
Hmm.
And so if we can shift marketing to connection and engagement and think about it in those terms, and it's not just about how much content you can put out there, it's not just about quantity, it's really what can I do from a quality standpoint that is going to engage, because the ripples from those effects can be really, really powerful.
Yeah. And I think I'm noticing just something for myself in case it helps someone give themselves more credit. One of my top values is connection. So it's kind of built into everything, and I'm doing it a lot and not giving myself really any credit for it on a marketing front. So I think
Mm-hmm.
what I'm realizing in reverse is that, oh, I think I'm kind of marketing all the time without even realizing it or giving myself credit. So I think that's just something to remember.
100%. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's not just about posting reels on Instagram every day,
Yeah.
or posting
Yeah.
on Facebook, or writing an essay on LinkedIn every morning. I mean,
Hmm.
for some people that works really, really well. And
Yeah.
the other thing too is what works well for one person may not be the best strategy for someone else. And I think that's what's causing a lot of people to chase their tails today, is
Right.
that we have so many people screaming at us saying, this is the answer.
Yeah.
This is the operating system. This is what you have to do. And my advice is, most of the time when someone says, this is it, this is the only way, this is how you're going to do it, this is the answer, this is a should, this is a must, like, run the other direction,
Right.
because that is not the case. There are so many ways to get you where you want to go. And again, sort of going back to, let's work on the brand foundation, the brand strategy first, right? The who you are and who you're speaking to, and what is it that they most want out of life, right? What,
Yeah.
or what are they struggling with? And
Hmm.
how is it that you help them? How are you delivering? And really looking at all those pieces and then creating a strategy based on you and also based on them. Where are they? Where are they hanging out? And how are you going to best connect to them?
Yeah. So it's the fundamentals, it's the foundations, which I
It
love
is.
and you love. And it makes me think about basketball and growing up. And it's like, no, it's the fundamentals. Get your fundamentals in place, right? Learn how to dribble with
Mhm.
both hands before you try to learn how to dribble between your legs. But there's so much in the marketing landscape is like, let's do this fancy hook shot versus can you actually hit a left-handed layup? So yeah, what is that? Why is it that we're always going for the flashy thing and not the basic thing?
Because I think that our culture reveres the flashiest
Oh, right.
things,
Of course.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, come on,
Hmm. Yeah.
but you're so right. I mean, you know, Phil Knight would, in his book, I think, talks about like how important the fundamentals are. And that was such a good example. We want the sexy hook shots and we want the accolades. Everybody does. But if that's where you're starting from, you're probably not going to get it. And then you're going to feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Right.
might give up, or you might feel dejected. You might think that what you're doing is not going to work, but really you haven't built the foundation
Yeah.
and you're operating from a house of cards.
Yeah. Feels a little more spastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So why right now? Because the business landscape has changed. Why is branding either more important or less important? Like, where are we with it right now?
Well, I mean, I speak to it from the standpoint of I believe that we need women building compelling brands. And whether you're an entrepreneur and a business owner or you're in corporate America, you still need to focus on you and your values, what you stand for, because women's rights are at stake, women's power in the world is at stake. And I truly believe that when a woman understands her brand, which I also equate with power,
Mm-hmm.
that she builds her confidence, because the brand comes first, not the confidence. The
Mm-hmm.
work, the brand comes first, then the confidence, the bank account, right? The seat at the table, building her own table, pulling other women in. And so I see it as a domino effect. And so to answer your question, I think it's more important than ever for women to build brands. I think that the opportunities to do so have never been greater, because the way that I look at it, I mean, I've been working with media for 25 years. And when I first built my first PR agency, it was so different than it is today. We were the middle women, if you will, and we had the power because we went directly to the outlets with the power, right? And so clients needed us to get them into the Wall Street Journal or to get them into Vogue. Today, you and I, every consultant, coach, business owner has the power to go directly to other people, to their
Mm-hmm.
consumer, to their customer, to journalists, right? So
Right.
the barriers have come down. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think the opportunities are definitely there, and the noise and the clutter are also there. So it's louder than ever.
Yeah.
And just because it's really loud doesn't mean that you screaming at the top of your lungs means that you're going to get heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really, really important. Just because it's loud doesn't mean that you have to get louder. It means that you have to get smarter, strategic, identify your people, who you're
Yeah.
speaking to. Because if you're trying to speak to everyone, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Clearer. But I hear you. It's like we can really run a business with kids at home from a cell phone. We can have a radio show. No one gave me permission to do this radio show. I just decided. And any woman can do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Your voice can be heard. And you realize your superpowers. You've done a lot of foundation work. You know what a powerful coach you are. Therefore, you decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to coach people on this radio show
Right.
so that people get a taste of my superpower. That's genius.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun, right? And it feels easy. I think what's so interesting to me, the more or the longer I've been in business, is like it's the stuff that feels so easy that's the most impactful. But that's because
Mm,
it's like I know who I am and I know what people want. And that's what you're saying is what really matters.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I do think that being in flow is a sign that you're putting, the round peg in the round hole. And I will add, I do think that there is work involved with consistency today in terms of being visible and connecting with people And, if you're choosing social channels to be consistent, and there are strategies that can be put in place that make it easier
Mhm.
versus every day, oh my gosh, what am I going to post? Scrambling to write something, scrambling to, get something posted on social media versus perhaps batching content and having one day a week where you sit down for an hour and a half and you think about your content pillars and you come up with maybe 5 to 10 different headlines, if you will, or blog post titles, and you write a little bit. And then you have that content for the whole week ahead that you can then
Yeah.
draw from. So it's having a strategy.
I think just using the term content pillars, for some people, they'll be wondering, what is that? I want to
What
have
that
that.
is.
And I know you have a
Mhm.
masterclass coming up, and I'm wondering, is that something that's going to be in there? And can you talk a little bit about both of those things?
Yeah. So, yes, it is going to be in there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But a content pillar, you could also say a content category. When I'm working with a client, and once we have defined who they are and who they're speaking to, their North Star metric, which is the value that they provide to the client, the brand promise, if you will, then we really do a deep dive into what is it that they are speaking to? What are the different categories, pillars of content that they want to write about, that their community wants them to write about, or their clients want them to write about, that's going
Hmm.
to either educate, inspire, entertain, that's going to provide value. So,
Yeah.
for example, I'll use myself as an example. I obviously write about brand strategy and I write about marketing tools. I also write about media and press, how to work with the press, how to get press coverage, how to increase visibility. And I also have feminism and women's
Hmm.
rights as a content pillar or content category, if you will. They are the things, if you look at it from a really broad perspective, that you care about most, that your audience, your community cares about and wants to learn about, wants to know about, that helps your audience get to know you, that educates, entertains, inspires your audience. Those are your content pillars. And it's usually, when I'm working with clients, it's usually 4, 5 at the most that are the most relevant, the most impactful. Because the truth is, I've had people say, well, I can write about 20 different things. And I'm sure
You're
you
like, don't do
can.
it.
But 9 times out of 10, when we look at those 20 different things, it can be distilled down into probably 5, and the other 15 can fit into those
Hmm.
5 categories,
Yeah.
right? So yes, that it is something we are launching the SheBrand Masterclass in March, so it's coming up really soon. And content is actually it's 4 live classes with me and office hours. The first class is brand foundation, right? What we've been talking about. And the second class is all about content strategy, content pillars, how to create. You could, in one week, create all of your content for an entire year. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that,
Right.
but some people like
But I
to do it
believe
that
you.
way. You can, yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
can definitely take an afternoon or two and create all of your content for an entire month. And that takes a tremendous amount of pressure off of people. So we're going to talk
Hmm.
about that. We're going to talk about different options, different posting tools so that you don't have to be there 100% of the time. I
Mm.
usually recommend that people do schedule their content maybe 50% of the time. So it, again,
Mm.
takes some of the pressure off.
Nice. Okay. Well, I'm going to come because I need foundations again. And
Yeah.
I need to know what my new pillars are because it feels like the ground has shifted again. So I'm excited.
Yes, I'm excited for you to experience. I'm excited to see what those pillars are going to become for you, for
Hmm.
sure. And we have a wait list for, we're going to do a first announcement. And if anybody wants to sign up, they can just go to shebrand.com/masterclass.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll put that in the show
Yeah,
notes
of
too.
course. Okay.
So before we ask my final question, I want to know what's one thing someone can do right now to make their brand more compelling.
So I'm going to make this a really tactical, because there are lots and lots of different things. Can I
Yeah,
have two? Can I have
sure.
two things? Okay. So number one, I want them to get really clear on the value that they provide. So there is a startup investor. His name is Sean Ellis, and he's the one who coined the phrase North Star metric. And it was something that was originally used in corporate America to help them gauge growth within the organization. But it ultimately became something that aligned with brand promise. Like, what is the one thing that people get from interacting with us, using our product, using our service? So for example, Facebook's North Star metric is bringing the world closer together, right?
Mhm. Like that's definitely happening.
Loom is videos with a view, right? For
Mm.
SheBrand, it's women building influence.
Mhm.
So the number one thing I want people to do is think about, what is my North Star metric? What is the value that I am providing for people? And maybe you want to go and ask 5 to 10 clients, or do a survey of your email community and see, what is the value you feel that you have gotten from working with me, and if you have a product that you have gotten from my product. So I think that can be extremely helpful for people. So number two, and this is just a really tactical thing, and it's also a big pet peeve of mine, but it really does make a difference, is I want you to go to all the places where you live online, right? So that's your website, your social channels, so your Instagram profile, your Facebook profile, and I want you to assess, is there continuity?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Visually, in terms of my messaging, like, am I conveying the same message wherever someone shows up to see me or to interact with me in some way?
Yeah.
And if not, if you're saying different things in different places and they're not congruent, I want you to ask yourself why, and then do some of this brand foundation work that we're talking about, right? Come take the masterclass, or Style and Substance is literally a whole workbook on brand foundation.
Yeah.
So that's a good tool too.
Yeah.
But really easy to just take 10 minutes and go and assess, where have I shown up online? Where am I active or not so active, right? Do you have a Twitter profile? I guess it's now X,
Mm-hmm.
right? That has been up for 9 years, but you haven't been there for 4. And you
I
have an
do have
old
one of those.
picture, an old tagline, right? Like, let's just clean up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's clean up the messaging. Let's clean up the visual look and feel so
Mm-hmm.
that there's congruency. Because
Yeah.
again, your brand is how people perceive you, and you have the ability to affect that perception. And so this
Yeah.
is one way to just get a really quick cleanup, if you will, for your brand.
Yeah. It has that feel too of like when you clean out your closet and then the next morning you put on an outfit that you haven't worn in a while that you actually really like and you step out again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
I know I'm put together and I know where all my things are, and I think it's easier to show up online if we feel that sense of cohesiveness.
Yes. 100%. I agree.
Hmm. I love it. Okay, so my final question is what what makes your life remarkable? Like, what are the things you do? Is there a habit or a everyday thing that just adds to that little bit of remarkability that you have?
So I'm just going to go with the first thing that hit me. Um, One is my son makes my life tremendously remarkable. Just,
Hmm.
brighter. He's very sunny, his
Yep.
smile. And you know this about me. I have, in the last couple of years, really, really become a huge fan of EFT and tapping.
Yep.
And so having that commitment and that discipline, I tap almost every morning, getting up, spending, even if it's just 7 to 10 minutes of tapping, really grounds me for the day.
Hmm.
And as you were just sharing, like, with an outfit that we haven't seen in forever and we've cleared out the clutter, it kind of clears out the emotional stuff and
Yeah.
allows me to show up fully and present. So I think, having my son and the discipline and commitment to something that really grounds me
Mhm.
um, helps make my life more remarkable for sure.
Yeah, love that. If you haven't tried tapping, do so. I love it as well. There's such
Yeah.
a thread of clarity through everything that you've talked about today, even the tapping, just clearing everything out. I was just wondering if that's one of your values.
Mm. Clarity is not, although it's interesting that you bring that up because I talk about it so much and it is
Mhm.
so key from a brand perspective.
Okay.
I mean, you and I share a few, connection being one of them,
Mhm.
right? But I haven't thought about clarity for me as a value, but it's definitely a tool. It's an
Yeah.
enormous tool for the work that I do. And I think it's the first step on the ladder, right? The brand ladder, if you will, the staircase, whatever it is. And if you don't take that step first, everything else is muddied and people are not going to be able to see you clearly and you're not going to call in, I believe, the right clients without that. And
Right.
so it is a really important piece.
Absolutely. I mean, I've felt it. I've lived this full spectrum of clarity and lacking clarity and what the impact can be on your business, your family,
Yeah.
your community. Mhm.
And by the way, I will just add, Karin, that we don't always have clarity
Right.
and that's okay. And, I think sometimes we have to, when we don't have clarity, not having clarity is just as important. Just knowing that, okay, I need to wait for more clarity. What can I do, right? What exercises and tools, what do I have at my disposal to get to a place of more clarity? And that might be working with a great coach. It might be, going through a workbook like Style and Substance. It might be reading a certain book. It might literally be kind of piecing your way through the dark a little bit and making some mistakes and some missteps, that those are the things that actually get you to clarity, right? Like sometimes falling flat on our face is exactly what we need.
Yeah.
It
I
doesn't
love that.
feel great because I've been there.
But it
Ah,
teaches us
we all,
things.
well, it does. And
Yeah.
so women put so much pressure on themselves to get
Mhm.
it right. And the reality is that we're not always going to, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's good. That's good permission.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm really excited to take the masterclass, and I hope that I see some of you listeners there with me because I think having our foundations in place makes room for a lot more impact, and that's the point. So let's do
Yeah.
it. Okay. Thank you for being here and sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.